First up, an irrepressible life force on the political and cultural stage. Mark Servian, professional friend, confidant and herbal consultant to the great riffraff himself. Lobbyist, trend setter, leader of opinion, sci-fi junkie and perpetually hopeful local body candidate. Mark describes himself as a Whovian, a label that demands some explanation. Whatever the cross-dressing company he keeps, being a Whovian doesn't mean that Mark is a fan of J. Edgar or the FBI in general. Nor does it suggest an unnatural interest in the 31st President of the United States, or, indeed, the domestic vacuum cleaner. Mark's enthusiasm is rather for small-screen overacting and shonky special effects, for the strangely asexual antics of the displaced Time Lord from Gallifrey. May he offer as much himself this evening. Mark Servian.
Curious, I didn't invent that term, and Esther down here is far more of a Whovian than I. Good evening. My discussion is about the Association of Autonomous Astronauts, Aotearoa. This is a look back in anguish. The Association of Autonomous Astronauts was formed in London in 1995 as a 5-year plan. The intention was to promote the idea that we should be getting into space. Here are some of the original European autonomous astronaut zines. As you can see, they also put together a expo called Space 1999 in 1999, in which they played three-sided football. The primary concept was that one should not be taking the mistakes of Earth out into space with oneself. That effectively going into space is an opportunity to start again, to build a new world in space. Now, those of us in New Zealand were pretty keen on this. Didn't hear about it until one of these zines turned up at Memorial Drive in about 1997. And so here are my zines. I set up a zine called Suspension in Reality, and proceeded to organise various autonomous astronauts events, which we reported in this August publication. We ran over time. The 5-year plan ended in 2000, but we kept going. First of all, we wanted to get into space. So we thought if everyone was going to get into space, we needed to use something called RAMTech, which is readily available materials technology. In other words, getting into space with whatever you've got around the house. This man over here, Adrian Holroyd, put your hand up, is the master engineer. The master engineer of the autonomous astronauts. These first few photos show the balloons we attempted to launch, which is obviously the first step in getting into space because it's the most basic technology, that we launched at the gathering. The first couple of shots at the 1999 and 2000 gatherings. Then we started launching them in Garden Place. Here you can see our early models had used black plastic. Later on we moved on to multicolored plastic, but eventually we were probably killing dolphins because they did disappear over the horizon and probably landed up in the sea, so we switched to crepe paper. It is really quite remarkable how far these things would travel. These events were highly ritualized and highly entertaining. As you can see, people were very happy about the fact that something was floating above Garden Place and disappearing over the horizon. We did contemplate other technologies, but never really got beyond the balloon stage. I've been most disappointed that someone recently actually figured out how to get Lego into space. Those of you who know, the other people were doing that. Now, this is an event at the Meteor called Born in the ASU, which stood for Autonomous Space in the Universe. This box here was a box that you went through into a tunnel. This small child with the umbilical cord attached to the wall hassled you once you got in there. That was the first step in a series of events that you encountered round the building. Here was Daniel Powell from Wendy House with his Star Wars collection in the foreground playing post-rock and roll. Over the back there's Russell Shaw, is he here tonight, who was up in the ceiling. This is before Soda was built, so consequently we could actually take a tour through the entire building as a form of processional theatre. We also put on Bertolt Brecht's Life of Galileo to coincide with a planetary alignment down at the Piazza at the Gardens with Alec Forbes, whom some of you may know, playing Galileo. It was a highly successful production, although it was a bit of a struggle doing outdoor theatre in the middle of May when things get a bit cool. We also got into if you remember back around the turn of the century, there was a lot of GE Free marches going on. So here we were at the GE Free march in Auckland. We heard that celebrities were going to be leading it, so we decided to go at the back and go as slowly as we could in order to make the march longer than it was supposed to be, much to the constabulary's annoyance. We also did it in Hamilton. This caused a bit of a problem because essentially the authorities the organisers of the march really weren't sure what we were up to and thought we were slightly sinister. This was because we were moving very slowly and not making any noise and not answering any questions and generally being a bit intimidating. Sometimes we just did something completely Dadaist. In this case, we just made a giant silver ball and rolled it around town. This was enormous amounts of fun. I have to say that the most important thing was, this is where we really got to the crux of the matter, which the more nonsensical it was, the less people actually understood what we were doing, the more they thought about space. Here's just a couple of nice little pictures of some spacesuits that we made. That's Adrian over there on the left-hand side. As you can see, he's at S Block at the university, which looks a lot like a space station, as you can tell. And that's myself there on the right in my stilt costume. Now, this was a thing we did at the last gathering before it went bankrupt, in which we got a punter to sit in the middle and subjected them to some very loud autonomous astronauts music from Europe, while on the inside of that cube there was a strobe light and various visual distortions. It was sort of like a acid-free drug trip. This is what happened. This is the chap going there. These kids queued for hours for this. They really did. We started about 11 o'clock at night and thought that we would do it for an hour or two, and then we were there. We had a queue for 4 or 5 hours. Once the effect of the people doing it when they came out saying, "Hey, we were so enthusiastic they wanted to do some more." But our ultimate achievement was our landing on Mars, in which we went up on top of Tongariro to the North Crater, and this photo here is called Zero Tolerance for NASA, which was a slogan from Europe. These images went all over the world. The autonomous astronauts in Europe, who were just a bunch of DJs, really. There's us on the way out, looking at the Martian landscape. You know, we were the ones who were actually doing the real thing. I mean, most of their groups only had one member. We were the real thing. The autonomous astronauts were more significant in New Zealand than really anywhere else, but curiously enough, much more popular in Europe. This is myself. There I am on Mars. I'm quite proud of that shot. It's one of my favourite self-portraits. Really, the thing about it was, though, you know, unfortunately, after this, I sort of had to go off and get a job and stop doing this stuff. But it was a great way to spend the turn of the century. The main thing we learnt is that basically you can get into space if you want to.
Not sure who let you into this space.